I can see, I'm still constantly working on those layers of rocks. And I'm just toggling back and forth, seeing what looks better. They were quite hard. I'm just getting the shape that I liked and that flow and the rhythm. It looks kind of easy, like because they're just big blocks of structure, but for me it wasn't. So as you can see, I have a lot of shadow colors, I would say. I don't always pick just one color and use that one color for shadow. I always try to have variations in color. But when you squint, it still feels mostly warm and more in the reds because I'm picking colors sort of similar hue. So that helps too. When you're thinking about, kind of wanting to spice up your painting a little bit, don't throw in colors of different hues, and different value. They'll contrast too much. You want to think about colors of similar value, meaning similar lightness or darkness, and similar hue. And that is how you can create those really nice pops of variation in color and just in specific areas. You don't want to do it everywhere in your painting too, or else, that painting will just have too much juice everywhere. You want to put it in select areas. Now I'm just playing around with adding some foliage on the right. I don't like how that one in the reference picture, it sticks out. So I want to just imply some sparkle of leaves, but create it, kind of give it a more ethereal look, not have it too concrete. So another thing I want to touch on is big shapes versus small shapes. You can see that I have bigger, broader shapes in the foreground rocks, and I'm breaking it down into smaller detail, implying that complexity in the rocks in the back. Not talking about the big, broad rocks. You can see in terms of color, I have a lot of colors in the shadows. I'm trying not to just stick with darker red or browns. I'm trying to kind of add a more yellow ochre for the bounce light. And then for the areas where it's facing the sky more, but not quite getting the bounce light from the ground, I have sort of some cooler blues, and that is really what creates that nice those juicy shadows and rocks, having that cooler blue and then the bounce light near the bottom. So again, all kinds of different reds. I don't have just one red in this painting. I have cooler reds versus warmer reds. And in my gouache classes, I teach that a lot too. Don't just think, oh, warm colors versus cool colors. Yeah, I'll just pair, like a red with a green or a blue with a yellow, because one's warm and one's cool. There's many types of warm and cools within one hue, so just red. So, for example, in the back rocks, I have some pops of this more vibrant red paired with a more desaturated red, which almost reads as a green. So it's really funny sometimes how you put a more desaturated version of that color, it reads as its complement sometimes. It's such a mind trick. So I have all these kinds of reds, and then the reds sort of veer towards the more, some warmer purples. So it's sort of all within that family, but all those variations is what keeps the painting interesting. And of course, we have the fireworks again, by the way. Sorry about that again. They're done now. Okay, so let's go back. Yeah, so again, about warm and cool variations within one hue. That is really how you can think about making a painting go to the next level. So now I'm just working on that river a little bit. It is a nice natural element that leads you to the focal point. Now it's just kind of capturing the glisten on that water, and that's also done, I think, with contrast and texture. Having a nice kind of scattery noise on top can imply that it's water. And now I'm also just darkening the edge of the rocks where it meets the ground or the river. That's also very important because then it looks like things are floating. So it's just about getting that an area that's dark enough but not too dark so that it stands out too much. So I'm still trying to figure out the shape of that rock I'm working on right now, that back center rock. I remember not being very happy with it almost till the end. Compositionally wise, I think I changed it a little bit so that rock should be pushed back more, but Those are little details that I need to fix. In terms of edge control, you can see how in my center rock, I actually have it sort of smudged in. I have the shadow smudged, and I like the energy it created. And I also kind of have it blending in into those big rocks. And what separates it is that sharp highlight, the top of the rock hitting the light. So that's what I'm talking about, hard versus soft edges. Letting some places go, but really creating that crisp edge in other areas. So as you can see, I'm still playing with that back center rock. And sometimes when I don't like something, I'll use the smudge tool, the palette knife, and I'll just sort of tone it down a little bit. And sometimes that softened smudge of color can kind of be a nice addition to the painting. But I'm trying to figure out how to imply those kind of the layered texture of the rocks in a way that's not too much, but adds a nice texture to it. And that's tricky. You can see my rocks are just a little bit closer together than in the reference. And I think I should actually push that rock more. I don't know. I don't remember if I did, but right now I'm just trying to figure out how to imply that stratified effect, but not make it look too busy. So again, toggling back and forth really helps, seeing if what I did was good or didn't really help. And also, I'm always looking at my thumbnail, my navigator in the top left. And that always helps me to be able to see whether something is too much or not enough. That is what I'm looking at half the time, honestly. So if you're not sure at your painting, always step back and squint. That will be your answer. Sometimes I get some questions on Instagram. They'll be like, how do you know when a painting's finished? How do you know where to add more, when to add more? And short answer is just squinting. Squinting will just tell you if your colors are harmonizing, your value is right, what shapes are working, what shapes are not working. So by zooming out and painting and also looking at my thumbnail, that helps me double as much. So now I'm going back to the back rocks, and I decided, I think, that it was a little bit too warm for me, so I'm going to try to add some more desaturated red, some cooler areas. And I'm just playing back and forth. I don't really like those gray strokes I just put down. I hope I erased that. It's funny sort of now seeing myself paint again, coming back to the piece and seeing what I would change and what I would keep and etc. So it's always interesting to get that fresh new perspective sometimes when you haven't looked at a piece in a while. So now I'm playing around also just to add a little bit more structure to the rock. Again, there's a lot of texture, and I'm just thinking about how to simplify that. I already know in the shadows where it gets darker on the bottom, I already know that I want to keep that simple. I don't want to try to include all those horizontal layers. I don't think it will help the painting all too much. So again, just playing with the light side a little bit. Sometimes smudging when I don't really like how it looks. And occasionally I do color pick from the reference. I don't do that a lot, and I try to stay away from that, but it's nice to see sometimes how that color I picked from the reference compared to the color that I chose. And a lot of times, honestly, sometimes even though I paint a lot and I'm constantly trying to, improve my skills, a lot of times the first time I color pick it, it's usually too dark. I don't know why, too dark and too vibrant. I tend to pick kind of more darker saturated colors compared to the original. So it's always something that I noticed. But of course, as you get better and you gather that mileage of painting and constantly practicing, you'll get better at just looking at something and knowing what color to mix and how to mix it, what color to pick. So it's mileage that really helps. And I'm just toggling back and forth. In the end, I think I went with a combination of a previous layer for some of the rock textures because I felt like I was just making it too busy looking, and that was just sort of taking away from the focal point. Now I did bring this piece into Photoshop at the end and just to tighten up a few areas. So I'll talk about that in the final image. But like 99% of it is done in Infinite Painter. So you're probably wondering, why is she trying to add all those, ridges and the rocks and, the direction of where they're going? They're horizontal, in the back rocks. And for me, it's because personally, the energy and the direction of my painting, I feel like those rocks are pointing downward at that focal point. So I want to keep that energy. I want to imply the ridges and the texture, but I'm not going to render it at any point. So to me, sort of interpreting the energy and direction of a piece or elements in a piece is really important. So at this point, this is about the time where I go, and I'm squinting what areas seem too busy and what can I simplify. And this is a time where I'll take a smudge tool and I'll just sort of boldly just erase, quote unquote, some areas, just sort of blend out the texture a little bit, the noise, and I'll see if it works. I really wanted to capture the energy of those rocks more. Like I said, that sort of downhill to me, it just was really pointing down diagonally, probably because the edge of that rock is diagonal. And so that smudging, the simplifying really helped to create that energy. But then I'm like, I don't know, is it too much simplification? Do I want to maybe bring back some of the texture? So maybe I'll turn that layer with the smudged rock on a lower opacity so that you kind of get a little bit of both. So I'm constantly asking myself those questions. I'm looking and I'm squinting and go, do I feel the energy of the piece? Does it feel like it's singing? What areas need to be tightened up more? I still think those stratified rocks in the foreground on the left need to be just tightened up a little bit, like right there. I don't know what's going on. So I hope I work on that a little bit. Again, it's all about implying detail. I'm never really thinking about rendering. I'm thinking about how I can best imply a little bit more detail in some areas. So I'm doing a lot of toggling now because I just want to see if it, whatever I'm adding looks better. And I remember thinking I couldn't really decide. I'm like, I don't know. Is this better or is that? And sometimes you will encounter those problems. You're not sure. And when it comes to those, it really helps sometimes to just stop painting, go do something else, and come back and look at the painting a day later or 3 days later. I do that with my big oil paintings, and it really helps. Like, that is the best, most natural way to tell if your painting needs more work or is finished. A lot of times I'll paint nonstop for 3 days, and then I will not paint for a week. And when I look back, I always see things after a week. I always see things that I didn't see before. It's like magic. So that's a really easy tactic. It's not always easy to leave your piece. I know it's tempting to be like, I want to finish all the way. I don't want to take breaks. I just want to, plow through. But sometimes, distancing yourself is the best thing you can do for your painting. So now I'm just nitpicking and playing around with finessing minute details. So it might look like not a lot is happening, and you'll see me toggling a lot because I'll add something and I'll see how it looked compared to before. And I do that a lot towards the end. I'm just trying to add a little bit more complexity in those rocks. It feels a little bit too simple to me. So I just want to pop the highlight area a little bit. And something that also helps, especially when you're painting digitally, is turning your painting in black and white to see how your values work. If your values aren't there, it doesn't matter what colors you put on. If your colors all have the wrong value, then your painting will fall apart. But if you can see color accurately, then if you put down the right color, it will have the right value. So again, value first, and that is most important. And colors also is important, but and the most important thing is that the color has the right value. So again, I'm toggling a lot here, just seeing if those little details work. I don't want it to be so crisp and complex in those back rocks that it takes away from the foreground, but just enough. So sort of finding that fine balance. So here's the final piece you can see up close. I brought it into Photoshop and I just added a few squares here and there with the marquee tool just to create some more concrete shapes. I did that in the trees you can see and in the back rocks. Just some desaturated reds and some greens to balance it out, those reds. And you can see from the very beginning where I started to now, I really toned down those reds in the back. I decided that I didn't want it to compete with those warmer shadows in the foreground. So I think that helped a little bit.